great parkour athletes don't always make great speed athletes.
Speed courses are way cooler when there's some element of risk that athletes have to navigate.
I think that's actually sick. I think if we can get to a level where we have courses that are sections are above water, that just reads to the audience, and you actually need that visual for it to make sense. Otherwise, we just look like kids running around. Hey everyone, this is an STS first. We lost the video.
It's gone, but fear not, we do still have the audio, so you'll be able to listen to this episode in full. However, you're not going to see the video. And that explains why we didn't upload on time this week, but we will be back on schedule for next week.
Enjoy today's episode. So I know we're way past New Year's right now, but there is kind of a resolution behavior that I'm trying to adapt. I haven't quite figured out where to do it. I do actually think the best way to start a new behavior is just get in. Like, it doesn't matter if you're too busy, just get started on it, because if you do it at the ideal time, it's probably not going to stick anyways. But the behavior I'm trying to start is I'm trying to watch more parkour content on YouTube.
Yes.
Trying to watch the vlogs, trying to check out the podcasts and things.
Consume the media.
Yes. Be a consumer. Stay in the know. Watch all the stuff that
Does that include Instagram?
No, it doesn't include Instagram because that's just short form. Actually, I think my Instagram consumption is getting less and less. And
Same for me, at least for parkour content on Instagram.
Quick little side tangent with that.
Yeah.
One thing with Instagram is I'll turn it on, in the morning usually, and kind of do a quick check through. I actually feel like that's when people post the bangers, because I think they're smart about it. I think they post usually like East Coast or West Coast, North American morning time or at least that's when they hit my feed. So
yeah.
So that's becoming, I think, the most valuable time for me to be on Instagram. And then I feel like I don't need to check it later, because if I check it later, I'm just scrolling through and then I'm getting ads or stuff that I'm not following anyways. So maybe one check a day, see who's done some incredible stuff, and then
move on with your life.
Yeah. But I am trying to pick a day or a collection of days where I watch some YouTube content, watch some vlogs and stuff. And recently, and both of us have watched it, is a Team Fat vlog, which I admitted to on a previous episode I'd been sleeping on.
Yeah.
And they do actually quite a good job with their vlogs. I enjoyed this one. It was a speed course.
The production quality is improved substantially since the last time I watched them.
Since the last time you watched. Okay, cool. So this was a speed theme. Orlando seems to be the one who always wins.
So so I just want to pose a question. Do you think that Orlando is the fastest speed athlete in the world?
He might be.
He might be. You heard it first here on STS. Orlando might be the fastest speed athlete in the world.
Very decisive.
Yeah, we don't know for sure though, because he only has really competed in these vlog competitions, and I guess he competed at Project Underground a couple years ago, I think.
Yep, I'm pretty sure it's an accurate stat that he has won every speed competition he's competed in. Including,
does that count though?
Including this recent vlog where they really, I don't know if they were hamming it up, but I enjoyed it. It was entertaining for me, where he was just hacking and coughing and stuff, because apparently he was sick while they were recording this vlog.
Okay, but that's a very poor metric. He's competing against his teammates who literally the majority of them were injured, or at least half of them were injured. And then it's such a small sample size of people to be competing against. But yeah, he did compete at Project Underground, I want to say 2 years ago, and won speed. But that still doesn't tell us that much, because he hasn't done any of the fake events. He hasn't done SPL or any He hasn't been involved in any of the other competitions around. Not that there are a ton of competitions that he has access to.
Yeah.
But it makes me very curious, like how good is he at speed? Because he looks incredibly powerful and fast.
Yeah, all of his skills that he seems to work on and just excel at, that he has so much talent and ability in, are the things that you need to be good at speed. So like jumping, power. He seems to be a very quick and powerful strider as well, and even a sense. Like you might have some things to say about climb up technique and things like that. I don't know if
no, he's good. He's fast.
Yeah.
And it, like, he doesn't do incredibly complex ascents, but he makes up for any lack of technique with just sheer power,
Yeah.
and he's so strong, and his upper body's strong. He's not just the leg guy. So he's just, he's up.
I would love to see
You
it.
like that sound effect?
It's great.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's exactly what I hear every time. I wonder if this is going to be the year, and I would love to see it if Team Fat tries to compete in SPL. You could call this a call out.
Okay, let's call it that then. We're calling you out, Team Fat.
Specifically, well, Orlando for speed. But do you think any of them do well in skill? And who else does? I'm not deep into Team Fat, so I forget the names too. Who else does well in speed? A bunch of them were injured for this video.
I don't know, it's hard to judge based on this video, but I feel like maybe Alejandro.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's so hard to tell based on these videos. Like it's easy to tell that Orlando would probably do well, but it's hard to tell how anybody else would do. And the issue I think that comes up with skill is I never see them touch bars or like do any kind of swinging.
Right.
Which would be an Achilles heel and oof.
Any
Sorry.
skill competition, doesn't even matter the format. Like, doesn't matter whose brand of competition. That, yeah, I'm not gonna let you get away with this one. No, we're not going there. No. Yes, that was the correct metaphor. Yes, moving on. Thank you.
Okay, so, but yeah, I never seen them touch bars, so I don't really know how good they would be at any type of swing challenge that would occur in a skill competition. However, they do have fat gap ability. They have a good standard when it comes to sticking. They seem to have otherwise a diverse skill set. So it again, it's hard to know without them actually showing up and competing, right? But you know better than anybody. Just because you're good at things in parkour is such a wide variety of things that you could be good at. Doesn't, like, if you are popular, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do well in a competition setting.
Yeah. Well, particularly in speed.
Yeah, I think also for skill.
Yeah, true. Because like particularly what's like really popular on Instagram, or even people that we would list off as like athlete of the year or something, might not be super well rounded.
Yeah, even style.
Parkour
Yeah,
athletes.
I mean all three really. But I think the ultimate test is really just participating in a competition, and that's gonna. And it's funny because it just reminds me of when Tim first competed at SPL, and it was like, who's this guy again? And then it was like, oh, he's actually the best in the world, like undeniable. And it was just, and I think he said he showed up to compete because he wanted to like figure out, like what do I need to work on? What do I need to get better at? And he didn't really learn that much from it. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess I'm just pretty good at everything, man.
He not every year, but there's been a number of years where he's asked me, like post event, like, what do you think what do you think I could have done better? What do you think I could do better? And one of the things I actually told him was had more to do with his plyometric ability. Like I find that he kind of plods through stuff, like relies on strength, but there's not like an elasticity or a springiness to him. And coincidentally, he's now, like for the last year, dipped into plyometrics, got a ton of benefit from it, and is now promoting a program with Kim Watson. So good for you, Tim. He actually did a story where he went into a little bit about how he felt like he relied too much on strength training to get better at parkour, and then kind of found the limit of that, and then it's like I should have started plyometrics earlier.
Yeah. Another thing I was talking to him about this most recent time for like after SPL, he was saying that actually like precise like single leg placements on things like rail running and things like that is something that is a big weakness of his.
I think I remember this.
Yeah, he attributes it to like not really doing any type of sport that involves like foot placement. For instance, soccer or football, as they call it. Which was an interesting perspective because well, in parkour we put a high emphasis on foot placement, but he did gymnastics. Gymnastics doesn't necessarily, like you're not really necessarily landing on things precisely unless you're doing beam and you're a woman. You're not going to be exposed to that type of action, which I found very interesting. But anyway, we should stop talking about Tim because we're talking about speed today.
We are talking about speed today.
And Tim actually did try to compete in speed. I think at least 1 year.
At SPL?
He tried to do. He did on-sites years ago. It might have been his first.
Okay.
Might have been his first event.
I recall that he's competed in it elsewhere, but I guess it wasn't very memorable. Is what you're getting.
Well, I guess he did discover something that he needs to work on, but then decided not to. Yeah, Tim, I wouldn't describe as a speed athlete, but he's very good everywhere else.
Yeah. And this is one of the topics that we wanted to get into today is great parkour athletes don't always make great speed athletes. It's like this area of competition. It's is it not the oldest type of parkour competition? Like officially and unofficially? Because you had an article on this back in the day. You did some research on.
So there were some very old like speed course competitions that happened. They might have happened in tandem with a style event, but I'm a little bit rusty on my history of parkour competition these days. All about moving forward. But yeah, I mean, it's the oldest idea of what makes parkour.
Yeah,
which is like A to B as fast as you can.
Also, back in the day, I think it was just an easier pill to swallow in terms of competition is speed competitions. Like, oh, of course, like that just makes sense. I think people were less in favor when I'm thinking of like the early 2000s of comparing like style competitor to style competitor, free runner to free runner, as we were saying, because it was more about like expression, and so it's more subjective, whereas speed is an entirely objective thing.
I feel like people who were anti-competition were anti-competition for everything.
Yeah.
So, but I actually think the style one was particularly sensitive because many people didn't feel like that was really parkour, but it was free running, right? And that was where they always drew the line. Was like, well, but we're actually doing a different sport. We're doing free running, so it's okay if we compete because it's always been this idea that it's separate. Yeah. Which now we don't think of as being separate. Some people still do, but we think of it as just being like different sides of the same coin.
Yeah. So probably the oldest, at least thought of, competition in parkour, and yet still, again, when we think about the most popular parkour athletes on Instagram, the ones that are out there doing the most incredible things. And I'm not talking about the most incredible tricks, I'm talking about like the wildest descents, the biggest gaps, the
biggest front flips.
Well, just, yeah, but anything, particularly things that get you A to B, the fastest climbs, all this stuff, they are not the ones that we often end up seeing excelling in speed. There's some exceptions there, but speed often gets talked about, like when Store talks about it, every single time they bring it up, like, oh, a bunch of unknowns. Like, that's who won. Oh, a bunch of, like, who's this person? And it kind of sucks because if you're like good at speed, then you're getting shrugged off by some of the most popular figures in parkour, just shrugging you off as like, oh, you're not very good. You're just somehow good at speed. So I kind of wanted to get into this today about talking about why is it that people who are great at what we see as like popular practice of parkour are not great at speed.
Well, what we do find, and this is kind of how you're framing this. What is so interesting is that speed is based on the original concept of parkour, and yet how parkour is popular practice. It's almost like you're not necessarily going to be the fastest if you're good at traditional parkour, which is counterintuitive because of this. Because that's the concept. The whole concept parkour is based on was this idea that you're trying to get from A to B as fast as you can, and it's this conundrum that that speed athletes find themselves in.
So, when we're talking about, okay, so let's just for our listeners, let's define this a little bit better when we're talking about traditional parkour, because I know what you're talking about, but give us try to give us a couple sentences here on like what the popular practice of traditional parkour is to you.
Okay, so I would define traditional parkour loosely as pretty much anything that doesn't involve flips, tricks, acrobatic skills. And so we can think of parkour as this idea of moving yourself from one point to another. And there are a base set of skills and abilities that we try to develop to get better at moving ourselves from one point to another. And so, of course, we have like walking and running, which we're not usually actively trying to improve on in parkour, but other things like jumping, climbing, swinging, vaulting, rolling, and everything that kind of involves the connections between those things. That's how I would define traditional parkour. It's developing your locomotor abilities, which just literally means your ability to move yourself from one point to another. And so what falls into that category? Well, any type of vault does, any type of swing does, any variation on climbing, whether you're dynoing, you're doing a climb up, you're doing a cat back, which is also falls into the category of jumping. So you're jumping running jumps, standing jumps, anything that would get you across a gap, clear a puddle on the floor, right? This is parkour concepts. Now, does flips fall into that category? It could. If you're diving front flip out of a second story window, that would definitely be the fastest and most efficient way to get to the ground, right? But that's generally how traditional parkour is defined. If we go a little bit deeper, there's actually, a lot of the times when you see people doing traditional parkour skills, but you do them in ways that are not very efficient at getting you from one point to another, that's still classified as traditional parkour, because the idea is that, well, you're doing these things in a way that is improving your ability to do them when you need them to use them in the most efficient scenario. Do most people practice for the real life scenario of running away from a dog or trying to get away from a fire or save a cat from a tree? Probably not. In fact, most of the time we practice this because it's just an enjoyable activity that involves risk and challenge and trying to improve ourselves. But that's the general idea of what traditional parkour is, and that's more than a few sentences.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. One idea that I would add to that that has kind of become like a simple sort of division for me, because this comes up a lot, and this is going off of the speed subject and into skill, but people will ask us like why aren't we doing like flip prees and skills, or would we ever do flip prees? So skill for SPL is traditional parkour, and for me traditional parkour are movements, and you kind of explain this in one way, but it's movements that could have a scenario where like you had to do them. So I can think of like a lache. All right, there's a bar. It's really high up. There's 2 points. Like you can find one of these somewhere in the world. It'll be very exciting if you ever find one, right? Because you'll be like, finally, I can use this, right? That was like part of my video project. Anytime I found like there was one thing where I did like there's a double step vault, and I felt like this was like the right application of a double step vault, because I'm not going to just go drop from this whole height. I'm going to use 2 of them, right? Probably could have been a different technique I used, but it was quite appropriate, right? So I think it's movements that are, again, let's say appropriate for the scenario, or there could be an appropriate scenario somewhere at some point in time. And so I would actually include front flips in there. Front flips are like a trickier one, where you said, yeah, like a small enough window that's high enough, like you're gonna have to, unless you can pike jump really well, which no one trains, but like you could like, squeeze through.
I think there's a very strong argument to be made that front flip will be less impact than just a standard.
I would agree, yeah.
Standard drop.
So that's kind of like the only flip I'd include. I wouldn't include 360 prees, because there could potentially be a reason why you would need to turn 180 degrees. I can't see a scenario where it would be appropriate to do a full 360 degree turn to clear a gap. So 360 prees to me are not traditional parkour. And this isn't a podcast about pure parkour. I actually love that move. I think it's sick. I don't think it's traditional parkour.
Yeah, well, so the thing about this is we have to draw a line somewhere when we're defining a skill competition. So where we end up defining it is traditional parkour skills. And so that means we're not going to do crazy like twisty moves or flipping, and we're not going to involve those in the competition. So we have to draw a line somewhere. But the reality is, in most people's practice, they blur the lines quite a bit. Even some of the most traditional parkour athletes probably know how to do backflip, or do flips in some capacity, or practice things that are more aesthetic based as opposed to utility based, whatever that means. So we have to draw a line somewhere, and so where we draw the line is traditional parkour skills, the fundamental skills just applied into increasingly complex scenarios. That is what makes skill competition. And then everything outside of that, you could use in your personal practice just fine. You could use it in a style line or somewhere else, but it just doesn't fit into our definition of what makes a skill competition. So we have hopefully a better understanding of now what at least we're defining as traditional parkour. So let's get back to the conversation of speed. Mm-hmm. And so why is it that you think, because this is something that you've brought up, which is that you don't believe that, or it's more rare to have somebody who is good at traditional parkour, and it's more rare to have somebody who is good at traditional parkour win speed events or be a good speed parkour athlete. Why do you think that is? Okay,
so I'd like to actually approach this from 2 different points. So we'll start with what they do wrong, and then I think we can go into what someone needs to do right, like what sort of qualities and behaviors need to happen in order for them to excel at speed. So I think what often the biggest one that I see an error with people that are great at parkour, and this was actually on full display when we were in Belgium last year, because there were so many guys that are so good that were competing, and we're doing like all the events. They were doing speed, skill, and style. Some of them, they will use traditional parkour moves when they are clearly not the fastest way to go. It's just a clearly bad choice to use. So an example of this, an underbar. An underbar is something where you're we know what an underbar is, obviously, but you're grabbing the bar above you. But what's happening is it's slower than actually jumping through a space almost every time, or even vaulting through, because the fact that you're grabbing the bar and then you're having to pull it all the way behind you, it actually increases the amount of time the athlete has in the air. Another example would be overuse of Kong vaults instead of speed or step vaults. I don't have like a full like list in my head, but those are like two that kind of like stand out to me. I even saw like a
shoulder rolls.
Oh yeah, doing a roll.
If you can avoid rolling, unless it's like through the finish, you should pretty much always avoid a roll in a speed course competition. A roll is extremely slow relative to other skills. Yeah. So what other errors do you think? Again, people that are, because I think a lot of it is just a lack of experience there too, where they've never trained a speed course. Like there's a difference. I think it's actually still quite popular to put together a sequence of moves and then try to improve how fast you can put them together, right? Whether that's a freestyle line, whether that's, like hitting a faster cadence, or like a flow
or flow. Well, like because like you can connect things and flow, but it can be really slow. And I always feel like that there's a variable of speed that needs to be included. Like when I think of like the flow greats, when I think of someone like Foskey, like he's fast. Like all of his connections are super fast.
Yeah, but he's not likely to do well in a speed course competition.
Yeah, maybe not, because he might start doing reverse vaults and Kongs and things.
Well, it's just what his skill set is made up of is vaulting, when generally speaking, you should do your best to stay only on your feet, except for when you hit scenarios where you can't use your feet. So striding powerfully is going to be your best, fastest way across most structures. When you run into something that you can't use a stride on, then you can start to think about kind of going down the list of alternative methods of maybe you have to do a plyo, which is going to be slower than a stride. Or maybe you have to use your hands. Maybe you have to Kong up onto something. Or you have to do a wall run and actually climb up. But these are all components of speed courses that are going to come up. But in general, if you can stride the whole course, you should. And that's the interesting thing about speed, is that it is actually a jumping type of activity, it's a jumping sport. To do well in speed, you have to be really quick on your feet. You have to be good at like moving quickly, so sprinting and jumping. So you have a powerful jump is going to get you far.
So this is moving more towards like now, like can you think of any more negatives or any things that people do wrong usually?
No, I think we pretty much covered that. Is things like a double Kong. Cool move, generally slower than if you were to just jump up and stride across. And Kongs in general, unless you're using them to get up higher onto something and you can't like stride or something, the generally is going to be a slower movement than, again, staying on your legs.
Yeah, real quick too, Kongs, the reason we're saying that is actually the amount of air time that usually occurs when you do a Kong vault. Even a step vault or a speed vault, you usually are getting over the structure and your feet are dropping down much quicker than they do with a Kong vault. So that's why Kongs end up being slower overall. And then any type of swing. Try not to swing.
of course, everything we're saying here, there's exceptions. It's based on the course, and the course sometimes will favor somebody who does an underbar versus an alternative skill. But generally speaking, these are good rules of thumb to follow if you're doing a speed course. So try not to use your hands whenever possible, especially swinging. Do your best to stride. But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, this actually reminds me of a story of someone who was not a speed athlete, who came from Origins, and we were doing an event which was actually the first titled West Coast Parkour Championships. And this was in Seattle, and it was an outdoor competition. So much about that competition was ahead of its time, by the way, because it was an outdoor spot-modified speed course. And we ended up actually having a course that I felt was really cool for the time, and we were never able to repeat it. And as a matter of fact, the location doesn't exist anymore. It's rubble. Anyways, what happened was Lucas Othmer was competing at this event, and he asked us pre-event, like, for anything, and we're like, we can't give you any details about what to do. But Lucas was a great jumper. He had great strides. And so our advice was, try not to use your hands. And he podiumed. And he's a style athlete.
Yeah.
Like primarily, especially at the time. He wasn't doing actually that much parkour, but it was just try not to use your hands. And it worked. And we just saw, like, everyone that he was against was using their hands.
Yeah.
Because they were less experienced, right? But that one piece of advice for most people getting into speed competitions is huge.
Well, it's so interesting because speed is this weird scenario where it's actual testing ground for what techniques actually work. And as parkour athletes, we go through this whole experience of teaching ourselves or learning how to do all these skills. And then when it comes down to, all right, well, our goal is to go from here to there as fast as possible, our tendency is to want to use the skills we know how to do. And it's like, oh, this will be flowy. This will connect really well to this.
It'll feel nice.
And it'll feel nice, yeah. But that's not always what's going to be the fastest. It might feel good. It might be quote unquote efficient, like you can do it over a longer period of time, like you won't fatigue your legs as much or something like that. But speed courses are this interesting testing ground where, like, what techniques actually work to get you from one point to another fastest. And it's I think, at least for me initially, it was when the first couple speed course competitions I participated in, it was kind of a surprise. It was like, oh, I did this big dive roll and I cleared over this whole thing, and why wasn't that very fast? And Justin Sweeney is here, just like, he just ran across the whole thing. And it's like, man, that guy is so much faster than me. Why is it? And so it was like eye-opening. And of course, that's a stupid example. I should have known that was going to be slower, but I didn't. And I think a lot of people don't know that something is going to be slower because they have this preconceived idea based on what we've learned in parkour of what skills are going to be fast, because that's what parkour is. It's made up of all these different skills. But generally speaking, it doesn't work. Or it doesn't always work. There's always exceptions.
Yeah. So and I think some people listening to this might be thinking about speed courses they either make in their gym programs, perhaps, or even events they've been to. But one thing that we don't do is we don't do any, like, floor is lava sections on speed courses, because that often opens up more traditional techniques. It's like we're saying, oh, you can't, swings are slow. Well, if you tell the athletes that they can't go on top of the bars and that the floor is lava, then they have to swing. Okay, yes, that works. But the other topic I wanted to get into next is speed cool? Like, is it so? Because we're going to continue to pursue it through SPL. We're going to continue to push it as one of the competitive disciplines in parkour, but it is something that I think is, if we look at our numbers too, for like our viewership, it usually doesn't do particularly well. We got the Store podcast where they're kind of meh on it. I know Callum really likes it. Like he really likes Speed. He thinks it's really cool to watch. I happen to agree when I see like a certain speed line that's really high level. It's really cool to watch. But I guess the question is Speed cool? And if it's not a hip thing, what's stopping it from being that way, and what can make it better?
So to answer the question, is Speed cool? It's always obviously subjective. But for me, what makes Speed cool and makes or breaks it is the course design. And I think we get a lot of positive praise for course design in SPL, but
sometimes.
But I was going to say, we really sometimes I feel like we nail it, and sometimes I feel like, oh man, what were we thinking with this course? Like it was too short, or it just didn't have that much variability. Because one of the hallmarks of a good speed course is when athletes choose different routes in the same course. So, which means either they don't know which is fastest and they're just trying to do what they think might be fastest, or they're playing to their own strengths, which is I could take the high line there, but I'm not as comfortable going fast on the rail, so I decided to go the low line and try to make up time doing it that way. And so I always think that's really exciting to watch when you see different strategies on the same course play out, and that comes down to good course design. Also, courses that force athletes not to just use their legs the entire time, which is what I was talking about earlier. So particularly courses that involve ascents. It's something that we always try to include in our courses because the ascending, first of all, it's variety. It's a different experience for the viewer and the athlete to experience. But it also demonstrates a more diverse skill set for the athlete. So if somebody is really good at striding but doesn't know how to do a climb up very well, then that's revealing a weakness on their part. And realistically, they shouldn't be the one winning because they have a huge hole in their ability. So a good parkour speed athlete should have the ability to climb up quickly. And then, and this is something that I know you're probably going to mention, but risk. Speed courses are way cooler when there's some element of risk that athletes have to navigate. Alternatively, if they don't have to navigate it specifically, but that's clearly the fastest way, seeing how athletes really manage that and decide to take a risk to get the faster time, that's very exciting to me.
Yeah, I want to go back to real quick the floor is lava type thing, because I think this is a solution, and it's excellent practice. It's something you absolutely should do in a gym setting, in a preparation setting. To me, it's not something that should ever see the light of day on the highest level of speed competitions. So if there's a section where you're putting on restrictions, like you can't go on top of here or you can't touch the floor, it's very confusing for a general audience to understand, particularly when it is actually just the floor. It's like, if you can make the floor water, like if you can Ninja Warrior it up, cool. I think that's actually sick. I think if we can get to a level where we have courses that are sections are above water, that just reads to the audience, and you actually need that visual for it to make sense. Otherwise, we just look like kids running around. This is also part of the reason why I'm not a fan of chase tag. Like chase tag just, I know there's people out there that love it and are really into it. It's quite boring for me to watch because all the things I love about parkour, like the risk parts, don't exist as much in chase tag because it's all low to the ground and it's the same course every time. So yes, you see some crazy dives and stuff, but to me that's not parkour. Like the crazy stuff that happens, like they almost bailed. Cool. That's not really what I'm into. So not super into chase tag. But going back to speed, what's going to make a speed course cool? Yes, you nailed it. For me, a big part of it is risk. And through that creation of risk, making opportunities for the traditional parkour moves to happen. And we try to do this all the time because the way that we set up speed courses in SPL with flags is we try to flag courses to incentivize cool stuff to happen. It doesn't always happen because sometimes the move that we think is cool isn't the fastest, and so athletes find another way, and then we're like, crap, this course is lame now because they found a fast way, but it doesn't look cool. And a great example of this is like the lache. We try so often to include laches in courses, and the only way you can really do it is if it's up high and there's flags that are blocking like the alternate routes. But it's tricky to do. It's tricky to do in a gym. I think it would be quite easy to do if we could build something from scratch. The other thing that I think needs to be part of a speed course, and I've probably said this to you before, is that your average person should not be able to complete the course. Mm-hmm. They should not be able to attempt it. This is like an elite parkour world championship speed course. This is why I think the FIG courses are whack, and you can see people do like some impressive jumps on them sometimes, but they're often littered with like slanted walls, and it just looks like a very narrow or shorter version of like an obstacle course racing course, where it's like they just have to go over a thing, go over a thing, go over a thing, and it's exhausting because it's like doing a 400-meter sprint, and I get it, but it doesn't have the risk elements that make parkour cool, and it probably never will because gymnastics is kind of anti-risk. All right, so final big question here then, as I alluded to earlier, who do we want to see compete in speed? So we already talked about Orlando Fat. I don't know what his real last name is. Ali
DeVoe, I think his name. Orlando DeVoe.
Ali. Who else?
I don't know if I have anybody else in mind.
I got a couple.
Yeah,
so he has teased us.
I know.
He's teased us.
I know. I'm gonna wait.
A number of times.
3, 2, 1.
Seabay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah.
SPL 3.
Yeah, he was supposed to be at SPL 1, but
we got another qualifier happen across the pond. Let's make it happen.
I definitely want to see Seabay. I definitely want to see Orlando.
I actually want to go into Thomas MPO.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll get that. I don't know if does he do chase tag? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't follow it closely enough to know.
I don't know if we'll get that, but I just think because he's so powerful, and that's such when we talk about the greats, that have been like that had like multiple year reigns as champions in speed. Mich Todorovic, Joe Hendo, Dylan Baker, Brandon Douglas, like all really powerful guys. So that's always just like a stat that's going to be up there as someone who. I would love to see Mish again.
Oh yeah.
I think just for just to see if he can do it. He'd have he has like the age and the lack of practice odds against him, but I would just love to see if he could just do it. He's so sick.
We already saw him compete, but unfortunately he didn't compete last year because he had surgery on his ankle. But Brody Pawson, so I'd love to see him come back and I don't know if his training volume is still up or if he's planning to compete ever again, but I'd love to see him compete again because he was also a powerful, good at traditional parkour athlete.
I already mentioned her, but Rene Dombley.
The return, I don't know if we'll see it, but
I always I told her this, like she's I recognize her as a gamer, someone that doesn't appear, well, at least what she posts on Instagram doesn't always seem to be like the stuff like, big things that are going to happen in a speed course or big skill challenges. I know she does include them in her regular training. I just don't know how interested she is, but she turns it on, right? and she's extremely fit, and that always plays to her advantage. Lola Roy.
I was about to say Lola. She competed at the qualifier at Hal 5 last year, and I mean she did a gap jump that none of the other ladies did, and was on target to qualify, but unfortunately got injured in skill, so she had to pull out of the competition. So we couldn't see her do. Fully have her speed course competition come to fruition. So
yeah, I'd also like to see Hazal. I think that's a very unlikely one, and I don't know how much her injury to her arm is still affecting her, but she's someone that is capable of the big gap jumps, seems to have a lot of power, focuses on climb ups and ascents as well. So like a lot of qualities that would play well in a speed course if she chose to do it.
Yeah. I'm sure there's lots of other athletes that I'm just drawing a blank on. I wish I had come into this question a little bit more prepared.
And that brings us to this week's comment challenge is drop some athlete names in the comments. Who have we not seen compete in a speed competition that you think would perform really well?
Fantastic question.
All right. I think that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, if you're not subscribed to our new YouTube channel, it's STS Parkour Podcast. You can find us there. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and we will see you once again next week.